Some terms of Irfan. In this section, we intend to cover some of the special terms used in Irfan. The Urafa have coined a large number of these terms, and without an acquaintance with them, it is not possible to understand many of their ideas. In fact, one may draw a conclusion quite opposite to that intended. This is one of the characteristics of Irfan. However, every branch of learning has its own set of terms, and this is a matter of necessity. The commonly understood meanings of words used are often unable to meet the precise requirements of a science or discipline. Thus, there is no option but that in every discipline certain words be selected to convey certain specific meanings, thus coining for the practitioners of that discipline a special vocabulary. Irfan, too, is no exception to this general rule. Moreover, the Urafa insist that none but those initiated to the path should know their ideas because, in their view at least, none but the Urafa are able to understand these concepts. Thus, the Urafa, unlike the masters of other sciences and crafts, intentionally attempt to keep their meanings concealed, so that the vocabulary they devised bears, in addition to the usual aspect of a terminology, also something of an enigmatic aspect, leaving us to discover the enigma's secret. Furthermore, there is also a third aspect to be occasionally taken into account, which increases the difficulty. This arises from the practice of some Urafa, at least those called Malamatiya, who adopted an invented form of ostentation in their discourses by cultivating ill fame instead of good name and fame amongst the people. This means that as opposed to those afflicted with the vice of ostentation, who wish to make themselves appear better than they actually are, the Urafa practicing self-reproach seek to be considered good by God and yet appear to the people as bad. In this way they seek to cure themselves of all types of ostentation and egoism. It is said that the majority of the Urafa of Khorasan were Malamatiya. Some even believed that Hafiz was one. Such words as Rendi, libertinism, La Ubaligari, carelessness, Kalandari, mendicancy, Kalashi, pauperism, and the like signify indifference to the creation, not to the Creator. Hafiz has spoken a lot on the subject of giving the impression of doing things that earn for one a bad name, while being inwardly good and righteous. A few examples. If an adherent of the path of love, worry not about bad name. The Sheikh Sanan had his robe in pawn at a gambling house. Even if I mind the reproaches of claimants, my drunken libertinism would leave me not. The asceticism of raw libertiness is like a village path. But what good would the thought of reform do to one of the worldwide ill fame like me? Through love of wine I brought my self-image to naught, in order to destroy the imprint of self-devotion. How happily passes the time of a mendicant who in his spiritual journey keeps reciting the name of the Lord while playing with the beads of his pagan rosary. However, Hafiz elsewhere condemns the ostentatious cultivation of ill fame, just as he condemns sanctimoniousness. My heart, let me guide thee to the path of salvation. Neither boast of your profligacy, nor publicize your piety. Rumi defends the Malamatiya in the following verses: Behold, do not despise those of bad name. Attention must be given to their secrets. How often gold has been painted black, for the fear of being stolen and lost. This issue is one of those over which the fuqaha have found fault with the Urafa. Just as Islamic law condemns sanctimony, considering it a form of shirk, so does it condemn the seeking of reproach. It says that a believer has no right to compromise his social standing and honor. Many Urafa also condemn this practice. In any case, this practice, which has been common amongst some Urafa, led them to wrap their ideas in the words which conveyed the very opposite of what they meant. Naturally, this makes the understanding of their intentions a good deal harder. Abu al-Qasim Qushayri, one of the leading figures of Irfan, declares in his Risala that the Urafa intentionally speak in enigmas, for they do not want the uninitiated to become aware of their customs, states, and their aims. This, he tells us, is because they are incapable of being understood by the uninitiated. The technical terms of Irfan are many. Some of them are related to theoretical Irfan, that is to say, to the mystic world view of its ontology. These terms resemble the terms of philosophy and are relatively recent. The father of all, or most of them, was Ibn al-Arabi. It is extremely difficult to understand them. Amongst these are Fayd al-Aqdas, the holiest grace, Fayd al-Muqaddas, the holy grace, Al-Wujud al-Munbasit, the extending existence, Haq Makhluq bi Hadarat al-Khams, Maqam al-Ahadiyya, the station of uniqueness, Maqam al-Wahidiyya, the station of oneness, and so on. The others are related to practical Irfan, that is, the Sayr wa Suluk of Irfan. These terms, being of necessity related to the human being, are similar to the concepts of psychology and ethics. In fact, they are part of a special type of psychology, a psychology that is indeed empirical and experimental. According to the Urafa philosophers, and for that matter psychologists, theologians, and sociologists, let alone another class of scholars, who have not entered this valley to observe and study the self at close hand, have no right to make judgments on the subject. The terms of practical Irfan, as opposed to those of theoretical Irfan, are ancient. They can be dated as early as 3rd, 9th century from the time of Dhu al-Nun, Bayazid, and Junayd. Here follows an exposition of some of these terms according to definitions ascribed to them by Qushayri and others. 1. Waqt, moment. In the previous section we came across this word in a passage from Ibn Sina. Now let us turn to the Urafa's definitions of it. The summary of what Qushayri has to say on this subject is that the concept of waqt is relative. Each state or condition that befalls the arif requires of him a special behavioral response. The particular state which calls for a particular kind of behavior is termed the moment of a particular arif. Of course, another arif in the same state may have a different moment, or the same arif in other circumstances may have a different moment that will require of him a different behavior and a different responsibility. An arif must be familiar with these moments, that is, he must recognize each state that descends upon him from the unseen, as well as the responsibilities which accompany it. The Arif must also count his moment as precious. Thus it is said that the Arif is the son of the moment. Rumi says, "The Sufi is to be the son of the moment, O friend. Saying tomorrow is not a convention of the way." The Arabic waqt has the same sense as dam breath and aishe naqt. Aish naqt, case of life or cash pleasure, of Persian poetry. Hafiz especially makes much mention of the cash of life and counting the moment as precious. Some of those who are either uninformed or who wish to exploit Hafiz as an excuse for their own perverseness suppose or pretend that Hafiz's use of such words is an invitation to material pleasures and indifference to the cares of the future, to the hereafter and God, an attitude which is known in the West as Epicureanism. The notions of counting the moment as precious or ready pleasure is of the recurring motives of Hafiz's poetry. Perhaps he mentions it 30 times or more. It is obvious that since in his poetry Hafiz observes the Orafa's practice of speaking in enigmas and symbols, many of his ambiguous verses may appear on the surface to present perverse ideas. In order to clear away such delusions, one may count the following verses as throwing light on others like them. Whether I drink wine or not, what have I to do with anyone? I am the guard of my secrets, and Gnostic of my moment. Get up, let's take the Sufi's cloak to the tavern, and the theopathetic ravings to the bazaar of nonsense. Let's be ashamed of these polluted woolens, if the name of miracle be given to this virtue and skill. If the heart fails to value the moment and does nothing, now much shame will the moments bring in for us. In a land at morning time a wayfarer said this to a companion on the way: "O Sufi, the wine becomes pure when it remains in its bottle for 40 days. God is disdainful of that woolen cloak 100 times, that has 100 idols up its sleeve. I see not the joy of Aish in anyone, nor the cure of a heart, nor care for religion. The inners have become gloomy, perhaps by chance. A lamp may be kindled by some recluse. Neither the memorizer is alone with God during lessons, nor the scholar enjoys any knowledge of certainty." Hafiz's ambiguous verses on the subject are many. For example, grab the pleasure of the moment, for Adam did not tarry more than a moment in the garden of paradise. Bushehr states that what is meant by Sufi being the son of his moment is that he performs whatever has utmost priority for him in the state, hal, he is in. And what is meant by the moment is a sharp sword, is that the requirement, hukm, of each moment is cutting and decisive. To fail to meet it is fatal.